So good morning, everyone, or hello, everyone, because I don't know which time zone you might be in. Welcome to our, I guess, last coffee with the dean for this academic year, which because our final exams are coming up in about a week, and the semester, winter semester or spring semester for some of you, will be ended soon. We are going to start our spring-summer semester, which is going to be, I believe, we're going to be virtual as well too. And we are looking forward to a fall semester that currently is scheduled to be face-to-face, but we have to wait and see what happens. So we decided that this would be our last Coffee with the Dean series for this academic year. And we're going to start again in the fall, in September. So we decided that the topics of this last call to be cybersecurity and how safe we are. The previous Coffee with the Dean, we focused around United Nations development goals, such as health and human well-being, water and sanitation, and so on. We decided that we devote this one to cybersecurity. As we know, technological development facilitated an impressive growth in international trade. However, organizations are facing numerous risks which result from their reliance on digital services and complex supply chains. One of the most notable risks concerns cybersecurity, which can take numerous forms and can have very significant negative consequences for the victims. This reality makes cybersecurity a major differentiator for organizations, an essential, sustainable economical development factor. We have put together an impressive group of panelists here. But let me first start by introducing our panelist, the moderator here, Mr. Joe Sawasky, who is currently the president and CEO of Merit Network, which is a nonprofit corporation governed by Michigan's public university. Joe will briefly tell you a little bit about the Merit Network and some of the initiatives around cybersecurity with Merit Networks. From 2007 to 2015, Mr. Sawasky was the Chief Information Officer at Wayne State University in our university here. And prior to coming to Wayne State at that point, he was working at the University of Toledo. And his last position there served as CIO, leading technology aspects of the unique merger of the University of Toledo, the Medical University of Ohio, and its academic medical centers and clinics. With that, Joe.
Well, thank you, Farshad. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I'll take that as a yes. And thanks again, Farshad, for inviting me to moderate this powerhouse panel here today. And I continue to be amazed at what Wayne State and the College of Engineering are doing for Detroit and really the globe as you talk about the United Nations goals and developing communities. So thank you for that. And a little bit about Merit Network. Merit is Michigan's research and education network. We were the first in the nation, believe it or not, among the states, having been formed in 1966 by Wayne State University, the University of Michigan, and Michigan State University. And today we serve all of the public universities as a network service provider, almost all of K through 12 in one way or another, libraries, governments, and other organizations. And little factoid about Merit, in the mid-'80s, Merit operated the National Science Foundation network, and that little thing became the global internet that you know now. So Merit was right there along with Al Gore, and we're just so pleased that Michigan has an important place in the history of the internet. And again, it's great to be back at my old school, Wayne State in Detroit, even if only virtually, sadly. And I'd like to thank Farshad and the team for inviting me to moderate this panel. And I'd really like to thank the panelists themselves ahead of time. These are very busy people, really fighting the good fight. And with that, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and start to make introductions. And First of all, I wanted to let you know we have two Dougs on our panel. So I'd first like to introduce Doug Song. Doug is the Chief Strategy Officer for Cisco Security, and in this role, Doug leads Cisco Security strategy and mission to transform the security industry. Doug co-founded Duo Security in 2010, leading the company to its acquisition by Cisco in 2018 for $2.35 billion with a B. That's the largest exit ever for a Michigan-based software company. Duo now comprises a key pillar of Cisco Secure's Zero Trust offering, the most comprehensive approach to securing access for any user, from any device to any IT application or environment. And we use it at Merit, and I know a lot of our Michigan schools use it too. Doug is a renowned hacker and leading voice in the IT and security industry. He's often quoted on cybersecurity issues by international media and appears on stage at industry events around the world and even at little virtual panels like this in Michigan. Prior to launching Duo, Doug spent 7 years as the founding chief security architect at Arbor Networks, and he also built the first commercial network anomaly detection system, which was acquired by Checkpoint. Doug is heavily involved in fostering entrepreneurship and community in Michigan. He's co-founder of the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund, helping turn new business success into positive community impact, as well as the Ann Arbor New Tech Meetup, Tech Brewery, and the Ann Arbor Skate Park. Doug also serves on the boards of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Venture for America in Detroit, and the Wallace House at the University of Michigan, home of the Knight Wallace Fellowships for Journalists. In 2019, Doug and his wife Lynn established the Song Foundation to invest in the people and organizations who are improving the quality of life for everyone in Southeast Michigan and to help build a more just and equitable world. Among its contributions, the Song Foundation led funding for over $1 million in emergency relief for small businesses in Washtenaw County, and the United Way's $1 million community relief fund at the outset of the COVID pandemic. He earned his bachelor's degree in liberal arts and computer science at the University of Michigan as a graduate in the residential college. And Doug, before I ask you to let me know what I missed in that impressive introduction, I just want to say thank you personally for all you do. You're a community member who cares, and we recognize it and we appreciate it. So thank you, Doug. Doug, did I miss anything, or would you like to add anything else to that?
I think you're muted, Doug.
Oops.
You're still muted.
And I know Doug had reverted to using his phone. Like any good IT expert, he had a disaster recovery option. Why don't we let Doug deal with that audio issue? And maybe he has. Doug, are you there?
You came and you're gone again, Doug.
I'll figure it out.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Doug, anything else to add? We can hear you now.
No. Just my apologies.
Doug, no worries. We have all been dealing with all of these web conferencing issues for the last year and some odd months. So I think we've all experienced it, and we'll go ahead and keep moving on with introductions. So thanks again, Doug. I'd next like to introduce Narasimha Nookala, or Nook, as he told me people call him. He's the VP of Engineering for Keyssa Corporation right now. Keyssa develops radio integrated circuits that operate at a 60 gigahertz frequency and support data rates of up to 60 or 6 gigabit per second using near field communications to reduce the need for mechanical connections, which is fascinating to me. He leads Keyssa's engineering teams in the US, India, and Taipei. He has over 30 years of experience in the semiconductor industry developing products for PCs and high-speed connectivity chips. Over his career, he's managed global teams in the US, China, India, and Taiwan. He's generated revenues upward of $1 billion, again with a B, and has also worked at National Semiconductor, Cirrus Logic, Silicon Image, MediaQ, Intel, and Red Pine Signals. And a really cool fact, Nook is also a highly esteemed alumnus and graduate of Wayne State University. Nook, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm thankful for the education that I got at Wayne State. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thanks again for joining our panel. Next, Doug Whitten is a lecturer within computer science at Wayne State University. He has an extensive information technology background, which spans over 30 years. He's been a programmer, application engineer, and security consultant. He's also a certified ethical hacker who enjoys teaching cybersecurity and computer science. Doug has created the new Wayne State Cyber Defense Club, which has been active in many offensive and defensive competitions. The club recently represented the school in the collegiate cyber defense competition in the state of Michigan and performed better than expected. The club is now gearing up for future events and is planning several community outreach projects, which is a big part of Wayne State's mission. So Doug, what did I miss? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't have anything with a B after anything for look at the two previous ones. But no, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Sure. Well, Doug, there's still plenty of time.
Yeah.
All right. I'd next like to introduce Dr. Helen Durand. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering and Material Science at Wayne State University. She received her BS in chemical engineering from UCLA, and upon graduation joined the Materials and Processes Engineering Department as an engineer at Aerojet Rocketdyne Corporation, which has to be the coolest company name I've ever heard, Helen. You also earned an MS in chemical engineering from UCLA in 2014 and her PhD in chemical engineering from UCLA in 2017, and subsequently started at Wayne State. She received the Air Force Office of Scientific Research Young Investigator Award, and her work has also received support from the National Science Foundation. She received a Faculty Research Excellence Award within the College of Engineering at Wayne State University and is serving as the chair of the Next Gen Manufacturing Topical Conference for the 2021 annual meeting of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. Her research interests are in the area of process systems engineering with a focus on process control, and very appropriate for this panel. Helen, did I miss anything? Would you like to add anything else?
No, thank you so much for the great introduction, Joe, and I'm very honored to be here today.
Thank you, Helen, and we're just so delighted to have you. And finally, Dr. Rhongho Jang received his PhD in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Central Florida in 2020. He's currently an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science at Wayne State University. His research interests lie in the areas of software-defined networks, network security, network traffic measurement, and mobile security in general. So Rhongho, thank you for joining us. Is there anything I missed for your introduction?
No, thank you for the introduction.
Okay.
So can you go to the next slide? So I'm gonna briefly talk about what I'm, since the given topic is cybersecurity, so I'd like to share some of the research items I have been doing and I recently focusing on. So the first one is the spam and phishing email. And during the pandemic, there is an explosive increase in phishing email attacks, which is most common form of cyber criminals to steal sensitive information and distribute malwares. So one way to prevent such threat is to increase the security awareness of users. I believe our university is doing a great job, since every employees and students must complete security awareness training, and I found the contents are really practical and useful. And the other way is to operate the spam phishing email detection function to automate the detection. Traditional approaches looked into like sender's email address, name, suspicious keywords, and so on to detect the phishing email. However, there rise a lot of false alerts. Therefore, advanced approaches like machine learning, deep learning based detector started looking into and trying to understand the context of email bodies for a better detection accuracy. However, this raises a privacy concern, since the detection functions usually operated by email service providers and managed in a centralized manner. And depart from the privacy issue, as all we know, the machine learning models in general are questioned about their robustness under an adversarial attack. And second and third issues are related to IoT and IoT malware. So according to Cisco report, billions of IoT devices are connected to the internet every year. So this naturally leads these IoT devices become the big data generators. So according to Seagate, 95% of real-time data will be generated by IoT devices. This results to general major challenges for network administrators. So first is how to manage such a big amount of devices, and second one is how to allocate network resources. So even worse, the last thing is not the last but not least is security. So IoT devices are known to vulnerable to malware since lacking of efficient security functions, leading these devices become part of botnet to commit crimes such as DDoS attacks. So these are the items I recently focused on. So hopefully the background introduction may trigger a better discussion in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhongho, for helping us understand the nature of research, and we really look forward to hearing your insights on some of these questions. And we'll talk about IoT and phishing and other things throughout this panel. So looking forward to hearing your perspectives. So why don't we go ahead and get the panel started? I think I've concluded all the introductions. So again, with two Dougs on the panel, I'd like to address the first question to Doug Song. So Doug, as you know, there's a tremendous national conversation now occurring in the area of social justice and equity. And simultaneously, there's an incredible lack of diversity, and it's been a real and ongoing challenge in the area of tech and cybersecurity talent. Given the UN Sustainable Development Goals for communities and good jobs, what can industry and higher education do to help encourage women, different ethnicities, and people with different abilities, such as autism, consider and succeed in the field of cybersecurity?
That's a great question, Joe. So I guess the first thing to note is that security itself is actually an intersectional problem, really, these days, because security fails at the intersection of people and technology. Right? It's not just a technical sort of domain anymore, because of ability to usability, design, process, policy, and politics. We see security fail over and over again. And we all know this, right? We all see our inboxes filled with spam, malware, phishing attacks, from the original Nigerian 419 scams to the elevation of cybercrime, really, for information warfare, right, by folks like North Koreans. Probably a recent attack many of us remember hearing about is WannaCry, right, which is actually ransomware built on top of an exploit developed by the Americans, leaked by the Russians, weaponized by the North Koreans, to hold basically the UK healthcare system hostage. And it was actually stopped by a 22-year-old black hacker, Marcus Hutchins, living in his mom's house. And so that's a kind of the world we're living in. It's like a sci-fi novel almost, right? But what it actually boils down to is almost more like a public health problem. How do you get doctors wash their hands? How do you get people to take their vaccines? And the socialization of security and the ability for security to actually be realized, right, that technology be effective in our world is a multidimensional problem that needs different skill sets, mental models, frameworks, experiences, and backgrounds to really solve from multiple perspectives. And so one of the ways I think we all should be thinking about how we achieve that is to think about cultural contribution, not cultural fit. I have a friend who was the CISO of LinkedIn who used to talk about these kind of archetypes he'd like to hire for insecurity, not skills, but archetypes like attitudes, backgrounds. And he says, he thinks of people as like defenders, tricksters, wizards, or assessors. And it's interesting to think about, what those kind of motivations and attitudes might be. A defender being someone, for instance, who's motivated to stop bad things from happening, right? Protect people and defend others. Trickster being someone who looks for flaws, right? Looks to break things. A bit of the wily sort of hacker archetype. The wizards who look at everything as sort of engineering problem, right? Everything's sort of like an engineering technical domain, or assessors folks who like auditors or actuaries, thinking about, again, how things adhere to the rules and coverage and making sure that the checklist, right, the pre-flight check, right, is fulfilled, right, before anything happens. And so I think one way we think about that is how we bring those domains together. And again, my own background is similar. I have an engineering background in CS from UVM, but I also did liberal arts. And to be frank, I think the liberal arts side of my education is every bit as important in terms of my careers as my engineering background's been in helping us intersect those things. And so I think that the first is to, again, try to think about the intersectionally, attract folks into the field based on kind of their motivations and those kind of attitudes and profiles versus say the exact sort of have you been programming since you were 8 or those kind of things, right? Those are not really as relevant anymore to the kind of things that we need to do in security. And so again, for an industry that historically has only had about 11% women in security, and there's a lot more that we can do to increase, again, the diversity of what that looks like, and our success, right, by doing so. I'd argue Duo was successful because we were 40% women and underrepresented minority in our business.
Well, Doug, that is fascinating, and thank you for providing those insights. And as you mentioned, cybersecurity challenge is a multi-dimensional problem, and it requires multi-dimensions and perspectives to really address. And I can tell you throughout my career, I think some of the finest IT professionals I've ever worked with did not receive technical degrees. Philosophers, archaeologists, and things like that, just problem solvers, right? So that is really, really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Building on that theme, Doug Whitten, my other Doug on the panel here, with this talent gap, I saw a recent survey, and actually you brought this to my attention, that said that in a survey of IT decision makers across 8 countries, it was found that 82% of employers report a shortage of cybersecurity skills, and 71% believe that this talent gap causes direct and measurable damage to their organizations. So this is a real issue. What is Wayne State, and what are you doing to help address this need and bridge that gap?
That's a good question. So I think a couple of things. One of the things that we're working on right now is a graduate certificate program within cybersecurity here at Wayne State. But that kind of dovetails into another area that in order for us to be kind of recognized as a leader, we're going through a process right now of being what NSA and Homeland Security certified as a center of academic excellence. So what that'll allow the students then is opportunities to get like internships and networking with the proverbial 3-letter agencies within the government. That'll give a foundation for it. So that's one. 2, we started a new cybersecurity club here at Wayne State. And, I'm really happy that we've got great participation, and the students are just absolutely incredible. The amount of talent and drive, that's really cool to see. But what we spun is we've participated in quite a few offensive hackathons. But the big one that we competed in was the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. And this is a statewide competition, and it's actually national. So what the students do in this kind of competition, and why this matters, is that they set you up as if you're a real company. All right, so there's 8 people on a team. And if you've never seen one, this is really red team, blue team kind of stuff. All right, so the defenders have to defend all kinds of Unix systems, Windows systems, networks, and they have 1 hour to protect these things. All right, and after that hour is up, then they're all already booby trapped. So the job of the blue team, the Wayne State team, was to figure out where they were actually coming in, how to thwart them. And while all this is going on, they throw an absolute ton of real world changes. So a lot of my background's within the government. Stuff that would have taken us weeks, months to do, you've got 30 minutes. So you better really, really understand this and know exactly what the hackers are, the hacker mindset is, how to prevent and how to thwart these kind of attacks. So this is real world stuff. And I think that really captures some of the essence of rather than just theory, this is real world stuff that happens on a daily basis, right? There aren't too many days that go past where there isn't a hack that's a famous hack that's in the news. And most of the time it's operational kind of things. The biggest Equifax hack that cost the company billions of dollars, and the CEO, his job, I may add, was an administrator that left the web administration password as admin. And they were sitting inside of there for 2 months, and that's how they extracted 150 million plus information from everything for the Equifax. But so that's one of the areas that we're working on. And I will say this for a plug for the alums. The donations that have happened through this organization's, first of all, allowed us to even get started with equipment and funding for the actual, competition. So my proverbial hat is off to you. I thank you. And we're looking for big things in the future. So thank you.
Well, Doug, thank you for that. And thanks for all the work you do with those teams. I know that takes an incredible amount of extra effort. And, you know, when I think about Wayne State, I think about, you know, the academic learnings, of course, but that whole real world experience, the translational from academic to practice is so, so important. And I love to hear about this practicum environment. You know, all my kids went to Wayne State, believe it or not. They've all traversed one program or another. And I'm just so proud of the school there. They all are applying those real world skills. And, you know, a couple of my kids are in healthcare, and they actually, through their licensing, you know, have to practice the exercise and show they have learned things. And I see the work that you're doing very similar to that. So very, very cool work. We want to hear more about that throughout the panel today. So Rongo, you talked about IoT as we learned a little bit more about your research activities, which are just fascinating to me, by the way. So thank you for that. Let's kind of go from the big picture policy down to the very small IoT, the Internet of Things. These devices, as so many of you know, present unique security problems, and that there's sometimes a general lack of best practices for security updates and management in the IoT industry. As one example, in 2016, the infamous Mirai botnet took down major websites worldwide via a massive DDoS attack using hundreds of thousands of compromised IoT devices, many of them video cameras. University scientists and researchers right here in Michigan, including my own team at Merit Network, provided a post-mortem on this unfortunate event. But post-mortem is one thing. What are universities doing to train engineers to proactively protect modern IoT and reduce risk to support the UN's goal in the area of modern infrastructure and innovation?
Thanks for the question. So from my point of view, so the first thing I want to point out is the natural traffic volume of those DDoS attacks dramatically increased in the last decades. And it even reached out as high as 2.5 terabit per second. So this traffic volume is way beyond like enterprise level firewall can handle. So the business industries have to rely on like cloud-based defense solutions, such as Akamai, Cloudflare, Google Cloud, to mitigate such threat. So university researchers, including me, are like actively working with students to improve the DDoS attack detection functions using advanced machine learning and deep learning technologies. But more importantly, in the meantime, we also focus on preventing the DDoS attacks from source or root by developing IoT malware detection techniques. So generally speaking, what we do is first we collect the updated malware samples from publicly available resources, or using an IoT honeypot, which is a device to induces IoT malware to drop their malicious part into our device. Then the collected malicious samples will be used to develop or improve the current or existing malware detection methodologies. And furthermore, for education, we conduct analysis on these malwares for obtaining better insights. For example, the static analysis allows us to learn the structural feature of IoT malware, and dynamic analysis helps us to understand the behavior of those IoT malwares, and temporal analysis will give us the insights about how these malwares evolve over time. So these insights will be reported to academia for the information sharing purpose. But more importantly, these updated insights will be integrated in into our cybersecurity courses or cybersecurity assessment courses for students or future engineers to understand attack surface of IoT devices and to learn the practical prevention and recovery strategies.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear that faculty are focused on these real world problems using advanced research to help protect us all. before this call, as the panelists were just kibitzing in the morning, Doug, you had mentioned that, was it yesterday, a bank was broken into through a Wi-Fi enabled thermometer in a fish tank? Is that what you told me?
Yeah, yes. A casino had been hacked through a fish tank thermometer that was Wi-Fi enabled. So
Oh my, that is
crazy.
that is just incredible. These little things that are causing major problems for organizations and people. Building on that theme of IoT, Helen, what are your views on the risks presented to society with vulnerabilities in major infrastructure, some of it controlled by IoT? Things like our water plants, our power plants, energy distribution systems. I remember hearing about the Stuxnet virus that was introduced and destroyed centrifuges in Iran some time ago that I think was introduced somehow through IoT, not knowing all the details. But what are your views on this? You work with large process-enabled infrastructure systems.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. This is certainly a very important topic. So I'll begin by talking a little bit about how automation is used for physical systems. We're pretty familiar ourselves with the idea of cyber attacks on our own personal computers. We know to watch out for things like websites or clicking on things online because we know that people could use that to mess up our computers or take money. But that's not the type of cyber attacks I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about ones that can impact a physical system. The way that can happen is because many systems of relevance to producing things we need, including things like what you mentioned, Joe, like power and chemicals and water, are operated using automation. And at a high level, the way that works is there's a computer system that can be used to operate physical things like valves. And often this is very helpful from the perspectives of things like efficiency and safety. But if someone goes into that computer and starts to manipulate the physical system and messes it up in some way, or if they mess up the communication between the computer and things like actuators or sensors, now you have a problem. And potentially it can actually impact safety and people's lives. And so then you might ask, is that for real? Can that really happen? And the answer is yes, it's real. And yes, bad things can and have happened. And so one of those is exactly what Joe talked about, the Stuxnet attack. And that occurred about a decade ago in Iran. And it was a computer worm that got into the control system at an Iranian uranium enrichment facility. And then it did cause the centrifuges to operate at speeds beyond what they could do mechanically. And then they were breaking. And that was impacting the Iranian nuclear program. And then for more like up-to-date example, something that's really close to home is actually that even 2 months ago, back in February, there was an attack here in the US on a water treatment plant in Oldsmar, Florida, which provided water to about 15,000 people. And it had computers that could adjust things like the levels of chemicals in the water, where an operator could go in and change that. And an operator was watching the screen and they'd set this up so that it could be remotely accessed. And it was fairly typical for him to see remote access, but as he was watching, someone went in and changed the level of one of the chemicals in the water, sodium hydroxide, 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million. So that's more than 100 times higher than what it was supposed to be. And so luckily he was watching and he changed it right back. But it seems to indicate that maybe someone was trying to manipulate the chemicals in water supply, actually in Florida, not even very long ago. And so then that brings up the question, what can we do about this? And so one thing is just to recognize that a lot of the problems do come from some type of lack of awareness of even just basic good cybersecurity practice or a lack of thinking it's necessary. And that's a place where Wayne State can make a difference. We can educate our students in cybersecurity and tell them about real case studies where there have been problems. We can do things like this event to let more people know and they can think about it and take action. And then as we move toward Industry 4.0 and more integrated manufacturing environments, we can be performing research in this area where we look at how we can try to keep pace between the new control technologies and automation and machine learning as we are trying to make sure that our cybersecurity practices and even research are up to date to make sure that everything we're doing is secure.
Well, Helen, you just have, terrified me with those examples. That is really scary stuff, talking about the foundational elements of society, right? Heat, water, electricity. That's one of the reasons I maintain an old carbureted generator in my garage that has no integrated circuits in it, just in case. So, wow. Nook, we've seen many incidents recently of cyber threats introduced into the supply chain. One where super microcomputers had unauthorized chips installed beyond the original design by a foreign manufacturer. And very recently, a hack that was introduced through the human supply chain into code used by SolarWinds that affected hundreds of thousands of computers worldwide, and many of those in America. How do events like this impact the UN goal number 9 of innovation and infrastructure? And what can we as technology professionals and educators do about that?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, majority of the hacks, 80% of the hacks take place in the supply chain. And that's a scary part. And the supply chain a long time ago used to be non-internet connected, made locally. Now it's spread across the entire world. You alluded to the Supermicro and SolarWinds. The Supermicro was Amazon tried to acquire, there is Amazon Prime Video now. Amazon was trying to acquire a company that does this video streaming service. It's called Elemental Technologies. They acquired them in 2015, 2016. Elemental Technology gets their video servers made by a company called Supermicro. And these servers are $10,000 to $50,000 each. So these are fairly expensive, fairly capable servers. And the motherboard for this Supermicro was assembled in China. And there was a 10-cent microcontroller on that motherboard that Chinese government, and this is speculation, right? Nothing can be proven. The Chinese government introduced malware firmware into that 10-cent microcontroller. And once this motherboard was assembled, Supermicro systems were shipped and they were installed all over the place. And they allowed a gateway into the network and they kept sending data forever. And this is, so hardware hacks are very difficult to introduce because you need to really physically go to the location of the assembly and introduce the malware into the firmware there. But there are, in China, the government is involved in this one. And once it is introduced, it's devastating. There is nothing you can do. Every server that is out there is sending the data out. And it kept doing that for years together. And then the second one that you alluded to is this SolarWinds. SolarWinds make something called Orion. It's a network monitoring firmware that actually looks at the entire network. I'm sure you are aware of it more than most of us. And so, but they did not hack the Orion as such. They hacked the software update process. And they were smart. They hacked it and introduced something into the code 6 to 9 months prior to they started using it. And once the next update cycle was coming into the picture, they introduced their code. And this Supermicro Orion thing is used by CIA, DOD, all the 3-letter agencies in US and every other company. 18,000 Fortune 500 companies were, not Fortune 500, but Fortune companies were using their systems. But there was one weakness in there. It had to be connected to the internet for it to become effective. So only 100 of these companies were connected to the outside world, and all the 100 companies, including the CIA and DOD, all that information went out. Now, how do you go attack against these kind of things? Software things are a little more easier. Hardware stuff is a lot more difficult to make it happen. But once you make it happen, it's very difficult to go figure out what has been done. So basic things like training, any supplier and subcontractor do a cybersecurity assessment of not just the company, but also the people. There is nothing that can be done to overcome stupidity. And all of us are that stupid. We just click on things that we do not know whether it is coming from WhatsApp or any place else. We just click on it without knowing the consequences of this one. So when you do the cyber security assessment of the companies, you have to make sure that the people actually have been trained not to click on things that are not from known sources. And even if it is known source, simple thing like making a call to find out, should I click on this one? Did you actually send it to me or you did not? And the other one is introduce into the contracts consequences that say if SolarWinds should pay the government billions of dollars, that would force them into saying that, look, I'm not going to exist as an entity anymore. If something happens, they will be a little more frightened of the consequences. And also get into this accreditation certification agencies for cybersecurity readiness for the companies. But all these things still do not address the software development methodology and the software update methodology. I think DoD is trying to come up with a scheme that would address that, an isolated container that will not allow things to seep through for development. But it still does not address the updates. So I'm sure we are living in this world of scary things that can happen. I mean, look at what Helen said. It's incredible. If I drink that water, I'm sure I would be dead. And so I am sure we don't have the answers, but we need to be careful. And we do everything possible to try and mitigate the issues, but there is no clear-cut solution that one can bank on today.
Well, Nuke, thank you for that. I mean, you know, that right there was worth the entire price of admission to this panel, which was free, by the way. So the three things, right? Training employees, doing audits and background checks, and then using contracts as business levers that have consequences. I think that is fantastic advice, and I see a lot of people jotting down notes right now. So again, thank you for, you know, sharing with us your experiences and great advice. I see some questions coming in from panelists, and I'm wondering if our webinar moderators could relay some of those so that we could have the panelists address those in real time.
Yes, we have our first question. What are some tips on creating and maintaining an effective user training program and creating a culture of security and governance mindset?
Thank you for that. Who would like to address that one?
I'm happy to try. I have a bit of a contrarian point of view on this, but to be frank, I'm not sure that we can train harder because, again, many of the things that users do, you know, our systems are designed to allow, right? You're supposed to open attachments. You're supposed to be able to click on links, right? And so the perspective we have on some of these things is we need to make the safe paths the easiest ones. And so there's a program of security design as much as security engineering that I think is required to do that, where again, the sort of right outcomes you're seeking are actually engineered by default. And so again, I think the gaps we've had have been with consumerization of IT, you know, the kind of technology we've used in the workplace now kind of invading all of our lives and all this kind of stuff. And as much as our professions, people are the kind of largest and broadest attack surface, but the tools they're using are not all that safe. It's sort of like we're living in an era where, you know, if none of our cars had seatbelts or airbags, you know, they're just, you know, unsafe at any speed, as Ralph used to say. That's sort of the way, you know, computing has been for a very long time, but increasingly it's getting better. And frankly, I think a lot of the effort and focus needs to be on how we get people to adopt safer technologies by actually designing for adoption, right, versus enforcement. Because these days, you know, it's sort of almost a complete inversion of control. Users get to do what they want, And instead of using like a corporate VPN to get to the corporate firewall, to get to the corporate file server to share something with a colleague, they'll just use Dropbox because it's easier and it's what they use at home. And so those kind of dynamics are very different, right, in terms of our actual lived IT experiences, even in the workplace, than they ever used to be. And so we have to think differently also about how we then, engineer the right kind of security cultures that, again, make it easier for people to do the right things almost by default.
A groundbreaking idea from a true entrepreneur in our community. I bet people are taking some notes on that right now too, Doug. Great insights. You're making me think now about these things as well. That's fantastic. Would anyone else like to address that question?
Hey, a really quick thought that I think from my own experience, like working at a company, I feel that management has a very big role to play in setting people's priorities, because, if people are saying like, it's really important you get this done, then sometimes you go through the most expedient way, which sometimes then you might do things too fast and not be thinking. And I think a large part of cultures of safety and governance does need to come from the top down, where the leaders are emphasizing like security is a priority. There are significant consequences for us not maintaining security. And so even when we need to get things done, we would rather that you take the steps correctly and whatever, be a day later, than that you do something wrong and just because you feel pressured, or I don't know, those kinds of ideas.
Well, lesson in leadership from Helen. Thank you, Helen. I know from my monthly all staff town halls, we start out with an IT security update from our CISO, talking about threats we've seen, things we should be aware of, and as an organization that has a triad strategy of network, security, and community, we want to be exemplars, and we're trying to make sure that starts at the top of the organization too. So great point. The humanware aspects, right? Anyone else? I see we also have some questions coming in from the audience, I guess. So would we want to ask another one of those?
Yes, so we have a question from Kamal. I work a lot with customers that are still hesitant to shoot their data to the cloud. How can we help them with that? Where should we focus our security efforts? Some use express lanes to the clouds. Does that help?
Great question. Who'd like to take that?
I guess I'll take a stab at it real quick. So I don't see there are definitely many differences between the cloud and a regular server, but it should be pretty seamless, right? The end customer shouldn't know, is this going to a cloud or is this going to some other data bank, all right, some other server? But I really think from where I sit, it's the infrastructure behind it. Who is are all of the holes patched, right? Do they have existing issues out there? A lot of times that there's applications that are put out into the world that are not fully tested, right? So, there's a lot of security pieces that should be in play that don't, and that's whether it's an in-house or a cloud kind of thing. But the basics apply to either one. How do I thwart an attack, whether it's at some a physical company or out into the cloud? So those same basic principles still apply, in my humble opinion. So
yeah, I agree with Doug. So I think as a service provider, you need to fulfill the demands from customers, right? So you need to have to give him a strong confidence on the service you are providing. So you may open some options for customers for conduct a survey and what kind of cloud company you are trust on. Then try to provide the one both customer believe in. So I didn't see any issues with storing the data locally, because oftentimes it may more like secure than storing it in untrusted cloud server. Thank you.
Thank you, Rongo. What do they say? The ethereal cloud is really just somebody else's computer, right? It's as simple as that. Doug, it looked like you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, both Professor Zhang and Doug. I think, the other thing to also kind of look at is almost the anthropology, the security anthropology of kind of how, what a cloud-enabled sort of enterprise looks like and how it behaves differently. So there's this notion of shifting left, where more and more, the responsibility around the kind of controls that we've otherwise typically had in a data center and so forth aren't just held by the providers, right? Who that other person's computer, right? Like a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon, but actually by the developer, who actually has so much more control over the configuration, right, of those computers and the security controls there. And so I think more and more we have to think about, again, how we deliver the kind of security to a different user, a different persona. And maybe borrow from kind of Professor Durand's specialty or experience, thinking kind of about the process control across like what is now a much more broader sort of system. Because again, when all the things were in the four walls of your building, your data systems, applications, people, and devices, you could exact a very clear kind of control within that perimeter. But these days, again, it's much more of a model of shared responsibility that we have to solve for. And again, the kind of things that we have to do might actually be more now in code, right, and deployment and configuration as much as in the actual sort of runtime environment and the security of the stack providing that, right. That's now someone else's job. And so, yeah, I think more and more we have to think about that program of security as a kind of broader sort of process, sort of model of many different personas and users and different security jobs to be done by different people than they used to be done by.
Can I add a thought, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely, Helen.
This is also getting kind of super theoretical, but I think in terms of looking toward the future, there has been some work in the literature that's actually looking at how you can use encryption algorithms that allow you to do things like adding or multiplication in an encrypted framework, so that you can try to run computations themselves on the cloud, with the idea being maybe if you don't want people to say you have to run a control algorithm on the cloud, that then the idea would be if you encrypt your data, you send it to the cloud, you never decrypt it on the cloud, you just run the control algorithms there, you send back the result, and then you decrypt back at the plant. That's sort of like a futuristic, I think, at this point, but I think it's interesting for companies to know that that is like an area that people are starting to research, because then you can maybe try to find ways that you can get involved or guide that research. We've actually been working, I have an undergraduate in my group for the last 9 months. She's actually been looking into that problem more and teaching our group about it so that we can try to see, can we think of anything from like a nonlinear control perspective where we might be able to work in that? I don't have any results on that or anything, but that's how I happen to know about this direction. And I think that's interesting to consider for maybe the future of the cloud. But of course, that doesn't solve your current problems with the customers.
So I have a counterpoint to that. As a small company, most of the small companies, however localized their servers equipment is, they are limited in their capability. When you go to the cloud, a company like AWS, Microsoft, Google, their entire lifeblood depends upon their systems being secure. So they have the resources and the capability to go put better controls from things being hacked than a dinky little company like ours that can, if somebody sneezes loudly, the company vanishes. And so my capability to protect my data is a lot more limited if it stays local versus if it stays on a very large company's cloud. So that's my counterpoint. And by the way, this is the one that I keep telling the IT guys in my company.
Isn't this panel great? Points, counterpoints, contrarian views, a glimpse into the future, information from practitioners. I swear we could do this all afternoon. If only this were mimosas with the dean, we might stay, right? So instead of coffee with the dean, maybe that's next year. We'll see if I can convince my friend Farshad to do that.
We will change that title for next year.
Fantastic. And we'll be all together doing that too, not virtually, right? To make it a little more fun and intimate. That sounds great. I know we're nearing the end of our session at noon, but one thing we haven't talked about was AI. And we have just a few minutes, but you know, Doug, you're at the industry forefront of this right now. What are your perspectives on AI in both the offense and defense in cybersecurity?
Sure. I think in security, the preventive controls are mandatory, right? You have, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, but at the end of the day, it's about prevention, detection, and response. And data drives detection, right? And the integration of our controls enables response, right? In the time frame in which we have to do it, which is increasingly internet time, not human time, where people can't actually go and fix things or react as fast as, again, attackers, right? We'll automate those attacks. And so, so more and more, the role of AI, machine learning, and so forth, and these were some of the products I built in part companies like Arbor Networks here. We have to figure out how technology can augment, right, the human capabilities that we have. We won't completely replace them, but there's many areas, right, in which, again, we really should be having machines do these things versus humans have to go and piece them together. And so I think as more and more of our systems produce a kind of data exhaust, right, across our environment, that we can actually produce insights and automation and what is orchestration, right, of our controls and response from, it will be, in effect, kind of a mandatory thing, because as others have said on the call, many organizations out there kind of lie below the security poverty line, right, below which it's not about just the financial resource, but the human resources, right, to be able to deal with security. And so that's a perfect place for AI and ML and technology really to kind of help fill the gap.
Well, thank you for that, Doug. The security poverty line, that's a really interesting concept. And I know Merit serving so many nonprofits in the state of Michigan, we see that every day where you've got single IT professionals wearing 25 hats and really doing the best they can. So that's fantastic. Well, folks, we have just a minute left. And I guess if we're ready to close out, I would like to express my incredible gratitude to these panelists. Experts, very busy people, as you can tell. They've given generously of their time. I'd like to thank the panel organizers, Chris and Audrey. Boy, behind the scenes, you were herding a lot of big cats, and you did a wonderful job. And then to my good friend, Dean Farshad Fotouhi, I just continue to be amazed at what you're doing for Wayne State in such an innovative and entrepreneurial way. Thank you for the invitation. And with that, I'll pass it back to Farshad.
Thank you, Joe. And the wonderful panelists, as you said, that spend time with us to share their ideas and point of views. And one of the areas that I thought we will be probably talking a little bit about is that now we'll be bringing a lot of these technologies to home, correct? It's one thing to deal with business, but now you have cameras that monitoring our activities in the house. You're controlling your refrigerators and so on. And so now you're opening our front door to hackers and so on. So that's a different topic for a different day, a different time, but boy, oh boy, but we need to continue working in this digital platform, digital world that we live in. And I think we may have another series of talks on this next year. But I wanted to, again, thanks everyone, the organizers, which is Audrey, Stephanie, and Claire, and our advancement team that helped us to put this together for the whole year. And looking forward to seeing most of you next year. And if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like us to cover and talk about, please don't hesitate to connect with us. You can contact any of our panelists here with any question they have, follow-up questions. Their email list is there. This conversation was recorded and is going to be available on our YouTube channel, College of Engineering YouTube channel. You're more than welcome to look at that. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach us. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.